Hey, how are you guys? Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed your first class, lesson number 1 last week on behavioral finance. We've had some excellent feedback from a lot of you. A lot of you have been able to reach back out to me with your completed assignments, and we appreciate that. So, a summary kind of last week's lesson, we talked about things such as values and what you should consider when spending your money to ensure that your money is going towards those things that are most important to you. We talked a lot about budgeting and how to keep track of your money and make sure rule kind of number 1, I guess, in finance is spend less than you earn. If you spend less than you earn, then you'll have extra money available to accumulate and grow, to save and invest, and that will help you in your financial future. Also, as a reminder, when you're budgeting, have room in your budget for some of your goals. So we talked about setting goals and SMART goals. If you have a goal, a financial goal that's out there, make sure you have room in your budget to put money towards that financial goal. Maybe it's saving towards education or to buy a new skateboard or whatever it is. Have room in that goal, or I'm sorry, in that budget to go towards your goals. So anyway, we appreciate your feedback, and we hope you enjoyed the lesson. Today's lesson could be, I think it's going to be a little bit shorter, maybe not quite as long as last one, but we'll have to see how it goes. The topic for today's lesson is borrowing. So eventually at some point, most, if not all of you, probably all of you will need to borrow money at some point. And we want to talk today about, some of the terminology behind borrowing money. We want to talk a little bit about how loans typically work, also about what it takes to borrow money for the first time and in the future, and how people track you as a borrower. And so those are kind of the main focus areas in today's lesson. It's an important one. Is it bad to borrow money? When is it okay to borrow money? These are maybe some questions that you've thought about, or questions that you've asked your parents. And in general, borrowing money is not a bad thing. It's how you borrow money and why you borrow money that can be a problem. If you borrow money, more money than you can afford to pay back, then that can be a bad thing, and it can lead to financial trouble. So kind of backtracking towards last week's lesson, you'll remember we have your income and your expenses that's mapped out in your budget. So as you borrow money, you now have to repay that at some point in the future, and really always with interest. And so now you have a new kind of expense item on your monthly budget. So you'll have an item on there for repayment of debt. So if you borrow money from mom and dad and now you need to pay them back every month, you should be making them a payment. That payment should include both the amount to pay back the original borrowing principal that you borrowed, and we'll get into these terms in a few minutes, but it also should include room for the interest that you'll be paying on that loan as well. And so if you start borrowing too much money and now you have to make bigger payments every month than you can afford, then that can lead to some really, really big financial problems. Many of you have maybe heard of the term bankruptcy. If you get to the point where you can no longer afford to make the payments or the obligations that you have entered into, then you may need to declare bankruptcy, where you basically just walk away from all those obligations, and you may not have to pay them back anymore, but it's not a good thing financially. It can really hurt you long-term financially. So we want to talk today about borrowing money. A lot of you will probably have to borrow money for school. School right now, college, is expensive, and some of you may not have enough money, probably most of you, set aside to fully pay for your college. And if that's the case, oftentimes you'll have to borrow money. And the good thing about borrowing money for college is typically you don't have to start paying that back until you graduate from school. But that could be a good time to borrow money. A lot of times people need to borrow money to buy a house, most times, in what's called a mortgage. So that's a very common thing. Oftentimes people borrow money to buy a car. So if you look out there the car is $15,000, you may not have $15,000 available today to buy a car, and so maybe you go out and you're going to borrow money to buy that car. You might have $2,000 available in your bank to put towards the car. If it's a $15,000 car and you're buying it, borrowing money on it, you take your $2,000 and you put that towards the car, and then you borrow the rest, which would be $13,000. So now you have to pay back, the remaining $13,000 plus interest. So the price of that car will actually be more than what you originally bought it for, because you're going to be paying interest along with that. So these are important things to consider. So we're going to talk some more about that. But one of the biggest, financial mistakes a lot of people make, they borrow money and buy what we call depreciating assets. So a depreciating asset is an asset that loses value over time, and a car is a perfect example. If you buy a new car today and you drive it off the lot, literally within hours of driving it off the lot, it is worth less than what you paid for it. It is a depreciating asset, as opposed to an appreciating asset is an asset that increases over time. So cars, as you put miles on the cars, as they have issues and they break down and things start to rattle inside of them, and et cetera, they're not worth as much. And so just the mere fact of driving a car off the lot, it now becomes a used car and it's worth less. So if you borrow money for that car, and again, going back, let's say it's a $15,000 car and you're borrowing $13,000, now maybe in 6 months from now or whatever, the car's only worth $10,000 and you had a loan for $13,000. So it can be difficult because people can buy these assets, cars or boats, other toys, that actually lose money, and maybe they're not as valuable to you anymore, you don't enjoy them anymore, but you still have to pay off that loan, and so that can be difficult. Kind of contrast that with buying a house. If you buy a house now with a mortgage, you're borrowing money to buy the house. Typically over time, real estate appreciates, it increases in value over time. That happens for a lot of reasons, supply and demand and stuff like that. But typically, for different reasons, a house will appreciate. So now, if you pay $200,000 to buy a new house, and you borrow $150,000, in 6 years from now, that house might be worth now $250,000 instead of what you paid for it, $200,000. And you borrowed $150,000, and so now it's worth $250,000. You have $100,000 of kind of margin inside of that loan, and so borrowing for appreciating assets is usually a better idea than borrowing to buy depreciating assets. Typically, if it's a depreciating asset, we recommend you don't borrow to buy it. You buy it if you can afford it, with the exception of maybe a car, which would be, going back to last week, needs versus wants. So you need a car to get yourself to and back from work. If you can't afford that, you're gonna have to borrow money. It's a depreciating asset, so probably not the best thing to borrow for. However, it is a need and not a want. A boat, typically, unless you're going to use that boat to travel to and from work, if you lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida or somewhere, so that's the exception. So for the most part, a boat is a toy. You use it for fun. It is a want. So we typically don't recommend borrowing money for something like that, because it's going to lose value. You don't need it. So that's kind of some basics on lending, borrowing money. Is it good? Is it bad? In general, it's not bad, but we encourage you to exercise caution when borrowing money. So I want to kind of go through some terms, some important terminology when it comes to loans. First, there are several types of loans that you can get. One would be revolving. So a revolving loan is, an example of that would be like a credit card. So the bank will give you a certain limit, a borrowing limit. That's called a credit limit. And let's say that's $10,000. The credit card is basically saying that they're authorizing you to spend up to $10,000 on their credit card. And let's say now you've done that and you spent $10,000 and now you've paid off $5,000 of that. So there's only $5,000 remaining. With a revolving credit card, you now have $5,000 available to go spend again, because they give you that $10,000 kind of window that you can use. And so as you pay it down, you can charge it back up again. So credit cards are an example of revolving credit. They typically will charge a higher amount of interest. The second one would be installment loans. An example of an installment loan would be an automobile or a mortgage. A mortgage is a loan that you get when you buy a house. So those are installment loans. The way that works is it's agreed upon up front how much money that you'll be lent from the bank, and then up front it's agreed upon what your interest rate's going to be, what your monthly payment's going to be, and when that money is due, ultimately the term of that loan or the maturity of that loan. And so typically you kind of have more of a fixed payment every month. You can't come back and if you pay off some of this loan, you can't come back and borrow more. It's kind of a fixed loan for one particular purpose. So that's an installment loan. The next one would be just a cash loan. And with a cash loan, you would just maybe be going to a bank and they would give you basically just money up front, and in exchange from that you have to pay it back at a certain time at a certain interest rate. So versus an installment loan is typically used to buy or purchase something. A cash loan, basically they're just giving you the cash, you do what you want with it, you have to pay it back with interest. And then the last one is called, it's like a service credit. An example of a service credit is something that you're getting a service, and in exchange for getting the service, you are committing to pay money back. And so that an example would be a cell phone. So you use your cell phone every day, right? And it's agreed upon that the cell phone company is going to give you cellular service and data, and in exchange for that, at the end of the month, you're going to pay them for using that. Utilities are another example, like electricity and your water bill and stuff like that at home. The city provides you with water, they pick up your trash, they do these things, and in exchange there's basically an agreement that you'll pay every month for those services. So that's a service credit. So those are the main types of loans that you can get, kind of a mix between a revolving loan and an installment loan. It's really more upon a revolving loan is what would be termed a line of credit. And I'll just talk about this one quickly because it is fairly common. A line of credit is where a bank basically gives you an amount that you're able to borrow at any time, and it's very flexible. And then as soon as you borrow money on that, then you start paying interest on what you borrow, and you have to pay it back. A lot of people have lines of credit on their house, and so if you have a house, maybe you've got a mortgage on there, which is an original like installment loan that you have to pay back over 30 years or whatever. And now, in addition, some people will go get a line of credit where basically the banks will look at the value of your house and they will offer a certain amount of money that you can borrow at any time for any purpose. And as long as you haven't borrowed money, you don't owe any money, you don't have to make a payment. But as soon as you borrow, then you're going to start paying it back. So that's considered it's a line of credit. It's technically considered revolving because you have this limit, this amount up front that you're allowed to borrow, and then when you borrow, you have to pay it back. So that's what's called a line of credit. So those are the different types of credit out there that you can borrow. When we refer to credit, we're basically referring to a loan. With credit, you're able to, you go out and you borrow money. So Um, let's continue about kind of some terminology. Again, buying on credit means that you're borrowing money. You're making a purchase now. It's important to consider this, that if you're buying something now but you're not paying for it, you do have to pay for it later on in the future. So you still have that obligation to pay for it. So you definitely want to make sure that you are it's something that you really want or need. You look at the instant gratification versus delayed gratification. So if you're looking at buying something now, you want that instant gratification. Can you afford that versus delayed gratification? If you wait and you put the purchase off, you save for it in your budget. So going back to week one, you have a line item on your budget that's savings for a car, and every month you've got a little bit going towards that car. And then when you have the $15,000 in there, you go buy your car. As opposed to buying it up front. So, delayed gratification is kind of important to consider when borrowing money. Excuse me, my air conditioner needs to be turned down a little bit here. All right, so buying on credit means you're making a purchase now with a loan. Principal. Principal is the amount that you borrow. So if you're going to go buy that car, and even if the car it costs you $15,000 to buy, if you borrow $13,000, $2,000 is your down payment, and then the rest is your principal, and that's the amount that you will owe back to the bank at some time, the principal. In addition to paying back the principal, you need to pay back interest. Okay, so that is what the bank usually, or the person lending you the money, that's what they earn from you for basically giving you money. So if I were to give you money, there's a couple things I need to consider. Maybe you never pay me back for whatever reason. Also, that money I'm giving you, I could be using that money to invest it or do something else with. And so now I need to earn some kind of interest or return on that investment for me lending you money. So when you as the borrower borrow money from me or borrow money from your parents or from your bank, you pay back interest, and that's going to be the rate that's charged to use the credit. So that's the interest rate. Right now, interest rates are historically low, and so it's kind of a cheap time to borrow money. And those rates just kind of change up and down depending on the state of the economy and things like that. But right now, in general, rates are pretty low. To give you an idea, like if you were to buy a house right now, you could probably get a loan in like the 4% range, maybe even lower than that, 3.5% or so. If you were to get a credit card, those rates might be like 15%. So it's a lot more expensive to borrow money like on a credit card versus to buy a house. So why is it more expensive? You've got collateral. So when you buy a house, that's a picture of a house, by the way. When you buy a house, the bank takes that house as collateral. And so if you stop making a payment to the bank on that loan, the bank can go in and they can take that house back from you. Okay, so if you were to come to me and want to borrow money to buy a house, and I'm a lender, then I would lend you a certain amount. Let's say the house is worth $200,000. Maybe I would be comfortable lending you $150,000. So you have to come up with $50,000 of your own money. We talked about that before, right? That's the down payment. Now I lend you $150,000. That's the principal, okay? And maybe I'm going to charge you an interest rate of 5% per year. Okay, so you have to pay me 5% interest per year. So on $150,000, that's $7,500 if I'm doing my math right. So you have to pay back to me $7,500 of interest per year plus the $150,000 that you borrow. Okay. Now, for me, I might be a little more comfortable making that loan because if you stop making that payment to me, I'll just go take back your house. Okay, so I've lent you $150,000. The house is worth $200,000. We talked earlier about how houses are like an appreciating asset. So let's say the house now goes up in value to $220,000. So you quit making a payment to me. So I go back now and I've lent you $150,000. I take your house from you. I go sell it for $220,000 and I pay myself back. I've made myself whole again. So collateral is used in lending to make the loan make the loan less risky, which in turn now typically will mean that you pay lower interest because the borrower feels more comfortable lending you money. The most common collateral you'll see for kind of individuals borrowing money is a house and a car. So same thing happens with a car, and that's why you make a down payment on a car and a house, because that lender wants to make sure there's enough kind of room in that loan that the asset can drop in value, and they still have enough collateral in there. So that's collateral. APR, and all these terms are going to be in the slides that you'll have access to. So APR is the annual percentage rate. That's really important, especially when you're buying a house. So interest is the percentage of interest that you owe on a loan. And the example I've kind of been using 5% on a house. Okay, so let's say you buy a house and it's a 5% loan. And you're going to go, if you go buy a house, you should shop around and try to find a good loan, the best rate you can find. So let's say you go to 2 different banks. And both banks say, one bank says it's a 5% interest, and the other bank says it's 5.25% interest. So you look at those 2 loans and you would say, I'm going to go with the 5% interest rate loan because that interest rate is lower. Well, now you got to also look at what does it cost to get that loan. One bank might charge a lot more in fees up front to secure the loan, like application fees and origination fees and whatever. So the APR factors in the interest rate and also factors in the cost to get the loan. So in my example here of a 5% loan versus a 5.25% loan, if the person charging you a 5% loan has a lot more in fees, their APR might be 5.3 or whatever, versus the other loan maybe has no fees at all. It's all inclusive at 5.25. So now that loan, the APR of that loan is 5.25 versus 5.3. It's actually a better deal to get the loan with an interest rate of 5.25 and an APR of 5.25 versus a loan with an interest rate of 5 and an APR of 5.3. So APR is very good for shopping a loan and comparing a loan. The loan term is the number of months. It's also it equals the maturity is what you also hear it called. Okay, so with a house, a lot of times people will borrow money because houses are so expensive that people want to pay them off over a longer period of time. So it might be a 30-year term on a house. So you're borrowing money for 30 years. So the term that loan might mature in April of 2050. Or if you buy a car, it might be a 3-year term. Sometimes it's a 5-year term. So the term is the maturity. It's when you have to pay that money. Ultimately, have to pay it back. So those are some of the important terms on borrowing money. There's also what we call amortization. It's kind of a big word, but amortization is it goes in with the installment. Oops, we don't have that up there anymore. The installment loan, which is the loan we talked about when you buy a house and it's like a fixed payment, a set payment every month. That loan is amortized, which means over time, the principal, what you owe, is reduced through payments over set payment schedule. And I'm going to draw up an example of this here right now. So give me 1 second. I'll draw it up and then we'll come back. Okay, so Hopefully you can see this okay. This is an example of an amortization schedule. So when you borrow money on an installment loan, like for a car, or if you borrow money for a house, you can have this amortization schedule. And particularly if it's a fixed rate loan, which means that your interest rate never changes, then you will have this drawn up in advance and you'll know exactly how much money every month you're paying and what that money goes towards. So in this example, hopefully it comes okay on the screen. This is in your notes as well. This is an example of a $1,000 loan, okay? That's your principal, 10% interest rate, and a 1-year term. So the maturity of this loan would be April 1st of 2021. Okay, so in order for you to take that $1,000 and pay me back in 1 year with my 10% interest, you would have to make a payment of $88 per month. So there's a way to calculate that. It's really easy to do. You can go online and do a Google search for loan amortization calculator, and you can throw numbers in there. So if you want to buy a $20 million house, you can throw those numbers in there and see how much you have to pay every month for that. All right, so in this case, $88 a month. So in month 1 of April of 2020, your $88, you're gonna have $80 of that go towards the principal of the loan. Again, that's what you owe me, right? You owe me $1,000. Of that $88 payment, $80 is gonna go towards that $1,000. Another $8 is gonna go to interest, okay? So you're paying me $8 of interest. This is monthly. Okay, so over the 1 year period, I'm going to earn 10% on that, or $100 on that $1,000. For this 1 month, you're paying me $8 of interest. Okay, so now the balance after you make this payment, the balance due is $920. You originally borrowed $1,000. With this first payment of $88, $80 of that went to principal. Okay, so your $1,000 now is down to $920. So this is really important. Now in month 2, your interest that you owe me is based on this new balance of $920. You don't owe me $1,000 anymore. You've already paid me $80 back. So now you're paying me interest on $920. So it's kind of weird the way these numbers work for rounding. In month 2, technically, because it decreased by so little, it stayed the same, 88, and now your 920 is reduced by another 80, so it's 840. So here's where we can see this now. So now you're paying me 10% based on the 840, and so now your $88 payment stays the same, but your principal now bumped up by $1. So now you're paying me back $81 instead of $80 a month. And so there's $1 extra that's being reduced from your interest and going towards principal. So now in month 3, it's $759, okay? Month 4 now, it's going up another $1. That $88 payment, you have 82 of it going towards principal, 6 of it to interest. And here's your balance. So as your balance goes down, you owe less interest. But because your payment is staying the same, you are now reducing the amount of interest, thus increasing the amount that goes to principal. And then ultimately, as you come down here, March of 2021, there was $88 due in February of 2021, $88, right? And so you owed $87, there's $87 that was owed. You owed $1 of interest, and then $87 went towards that final payment. And now there's nothing left on that loan. So you can see this in the slides, but for example, if you look in December, you have $85 going towards principal and only $3 going to interest. So you see how your interest is reduced. So a good strategy for paying off installment loans quickly is to increase your payment. Okay, so this $88 is that's your payment, principal payment that's due, or your loan payment that's due. So let's say you had extra money and now you increase that payment to $188 per month. So now you have an extra $100 going into this loan. Your interest for month 1 stays the same. Okay, but now you're paying $180 towards principal. Your balance due now is only $820 instead of $920 because you paid an extra $100 towards it. And so when you increase your payment, it'll really speed up the process of paying off this loan. The payment stays the same, $88, but you'll quickly see that more and more of that payment goes towards principal, and you can pay off the loans much faster. So even just adding like one extra payment a year can help a lot. So that's important. Now, if you accumulate debt, one strategy that people like to do is they like to take as much of their extra money as they can, and you pay off your most important your highest interest rate credit first. And let's say you have a credit card and it's $300 a month that you're paying. You pay that off, and now you take that $300 a month and you take that and you add it to whatever it is you're paying on your next loan. Let's say it's $100 on another loan. So now you have $400 going towards the second loan to pay off. So every time you pay off a loan, you take what you were paying towards that loan, bump it up to the next loan, and then the next loan, and then that way you pay it off. You pay off your loans quicker. So pay extra towards your principal if you can. One thing to be very, very cautious of, credit cards work a little bit different than this because there's not a set payment schedule. So, but for, let's say you did borrow this $100,000 on a credit card and at a 10% interest, year one or month one, you would owe interest of $8. So the credit card company, usually they'll require you to pay at least the interest back. So let's just say you're only required to make an interest payment. You could keep paying interest on this thing and never pay the principal down. And now this loan's dragging on forever and you're paying a lot more interest because you're never paying the principal off. So you want to be careful of that. Even worse would be if your minimum monthly payment is lower than the interest. So let's just say, for example, that this bank required you to only make a $5 a month payment and yet $8 that was due in interest. So now you're not even paying all your interest. So in addition to the principal that you're going to owe, they're going to start adding on top of that unpaid interest. And now your interest being charged is on a higher amount because you're adding more money to it instead of taking money away. So watch out for loans where you're paying less or required to pay less than even the interest. It'll turn into what we call compounded interest. It's not good. So be careful of that. Always try to take out money and borrow money if you can pay it back, and preferably if you can make extra payments to pay it off even quicker. So that's kind of the details on loan amortization. So the next part of our lesson, we're going to talk about what does it take to borrow money? How do you get a loan approved? Things like that. So when you go to borrow money, you'll fill out a loan application, and it's important. It's actually the law to complete that loan application honestly. They will ask for your name, address, date of birth, social security number. So that social security number is used to identify yourself from other people. Many people share your date of birth, but you are the only one with your social security number. So that's a way that institutions can make sure you are who you are. They'll want to know who you're employed by. So who do you work for? How much money do you earn? Do you own your house? How long have you lived in your house? How long have you had your job? Who's your bank? How much money do you have in your banks? Do you rent your house, or do you rent versus own a house? And if so, how much do you pay in rent versus a mortgage? So these are the types of questions that you'll have to answer when applying for a loan. So it's common sense, really. If a friend came to you and wanted to borrow money, you would kind of want to know, right, what that person, what do they have money to pay you back? Where do they live, so you could get a hold of them if they weren't paying you. You really want to know who they were, right, to make sure that you could reach out to them and get the money. So these are things that it's pretty common sense, but those are required in order to get a loan. So how is all this tracked And how does a bank know if they should lend money to you? If I'm your friend and you come to me and say, I want to borrow $500. I need to buy a new computer for school and I don't have enough money. Will you lend me $500? If we're friends and I know your situation, I know kind of that you're a man of your word, you'll pay it back. I know, where you live. I know what kind of job you have. I might be comfortable making that loan. But if you go to a bank doesn't know you. So how do they know? There are agencies out there, okay? Credit agencies, and they kind of keep track of these things. So there's three main. I do this all the time. When I bend over, I step on my mic. All right, there's three main credit agencies. Erase this. Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Okay, so there's three companies out there, and they are the ones that are kind of monitoring you and how you borrow money. Okay, so these companies, they take all that data, okay, and they'll communicate over here with banks, lenders, landlords. Okay, a landlord is a term for someone that owns a property that you want to rent. So if you're going to go rent an apartment, the landlord is the owner. They want to know what type of person you are financially. Do you pay back your obligations? Okay, even employers, when an employer hires you, they might go and run a credit check. Okay, so these banks and individuals communicate, okay, with each other to know, are you somebody that I should lend money to? So as you borrow money, these credit agencies keep track of how much money you borrowed, when you borrowed it, what types of loans are they? Are they revolving loans? Are they installment loans? If you've already got a bunch of revolving loans out there, a bank might be worried to give you more because you might not be able to afford it. What is your payment history? Have you been late on any payments? Have you missed any payments? Have you ever just walked away from a loan and not paid it back at all? Those are the types of things that these credit companies, these companies, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, monitor. Okay, and they actually will give you a grade depending on how good you are as a borrower. And there's like a score. So, for example, you can Google search this. I don't think it's in the slides, but a score of 670 to 739 is good credit. So someone like that is good. They pay back their obligations. They're doing what they should be doing. They borrowed the right amount of money versus what they can afford or whatever. 740 to 799 is very good. Over 800 to 850 is exceptional. Fair would be lower, 580 to 669. So there's kind of fair, good, very good, and exceptional. So the higher your credit score, usually the lower your rate that you can get on a loan because banks are more comfortable lending to you. So that's why it's important to pay back your obligations. It's important to keep track of monthly payments, what you have to pay back and when, and make those payments on time. Okay, you might feel like, oh, it's okay if I'm 5 days late on making this payment to my credit card company. Well, they're not necessarily going to be happy with that. And if you do that, and if you're late enough or long enough, then they will report that back to these credit companies. And now your credit score drops. And next time you go to borrow money, it's going to cost you more money. It'll be more expensive. You might even get declined. on a loan. So you go to buy a new car, and they'll say, "I'm sorry, we can't lend you money." And you'll say, "Why can't you lend me money?" "Well, you've had 3 loans in the past that you never paid back, or you're always late on your payment, and so instead of giving you a rate of 5% on this car, you have to pay 6.5% because you're a higher risk borrower." Okay, so that's how this works. So these credit companies, they report over here to the lenders when you're applying for a loan, so that they know, these lenders know kind of what they're in for, and then the lenders report back to the credit companies how you're doing, and so it's kind of a two-way street here, and it's critical. So this is what you call building credit. If you have never borrowed money before, if you have no credit, the first time you borrow money, you might need to have a parent or somebody do what's called co-sign with you. And they would be a second person on the loan that now would give the lenders more confidence, because now there's not only you behind the loan, but your parents. And your parents probably have credit history. And now you do that for a little while, and you kind of build up the credit, and off you go. You can try to take out credit on a credit card when you get into college, and just use it very cautiously, pay it back every month, and you can start building credit that way. As you rent apartments and things like that, you're starting to build credit. So there's different things you can do to build credit, but it's important to start doing that. All right, so that's how credit, that's how it works to apply for credit. That's how it works as far as monitoring how much money you're approved for on a loan. It just depends on kind of what the credit companies come back with your credit score, as well as how much income you earn, and how much you've already borrowed. So banks are hesitant to lend if you start getting too much. A certain percentage of your income going towards your debt every month, they'll start getting nervous. So, you start pushing over 30% and stuff like that, they'll get nervous, and they may not want to lend you more money. All right. So, being a shrewd borrower is the next thing to talk about. So last week we talked about SMART goals, and remember, for SMART we listed out some different terms. So that's what we're gonna do for this. Shrewd, okay, being a shrewd borrower. First one, sincere. Is there a sincere need or want for whatever it is I'm borrowing? Second, happy. Am I happy to make this payment? Okay, and usually when you borrow money up front, you always feel like you're going to be happy, because there's a reason why you borrow money. You're excited to buy whatever you're going to buy. But will you be happy to write that payment in a year from now or 2 years from now, when that car gets a little bit older and is dirty and it's not running like it did when it was brand new? Are you still going to be happy to make that payment? Okay. R is room. Is there room in my spending plan? Is there room in my budget? Okay, if I now have a $300 a month car payment, will that fit in my budget? Or is that going to get me where I'm now negative and I don't have any money left over? Is that $300 payment now going to keep me from being able to pay myself first and save for my future? Okay, so make sure there's room. Extra. What will the extra cost be of borrowing this money? Again, you're paying interest, so that's an extra cost. Are there any other fees or anything like that? Sometimes if you pay with a credit card, companies will charge you more than if you pay with cash, because the credit card companies will charge them, and they'll pass that charge to you. Sometimes it's like 2% or whatever. So is there an extra cost? What is the waiting cost? Okay. Is there a cost to wait? Maybe, like if you're going to buy a house and you feel like this is just such a good price on this house and it's going to appreciate over time, then there would be a cost to wait. So think about those things. And then disciplined. Or discipline. Will I be disciplined to repay this loan on time. Okay, so Shrewd. Am I a shrewd borrower, and is this a shrewd decision? So I know you're not going to remember. You're not going to go and when you're going to take out a loan, you're going to Shrewd remember all these things. But if you do, great. But just think about it. Think about these things, and when you go to borrow money. So anyway, that's the today's lesson. The lesson challenge. I am going to post the lesson challenge in the email. I haven't figured out yet what that challenge is going to be, so I'll make sure that's posted in the email. You'll see it there. It's not too late to go back to lesson 1 if you haven't done it yet. Do lesson 1 and do the challenge. Reminder, let us know when you watch the video. You get 1 point just for watching the video, even if you don't do the assignment. You get 2 points, extra points if you do the assignment, so total of 3 points. Each point will be a raffle ticket. We will raffle off the AirPod Pros at the end of the class period. In addition, we may throw in a couple other small raffles in there as well. So anyway, we appreciate your interest. Call with questions, email me. I've gotten a lot of questions already from you guys on the information. Keep it up. All right, hope this lesson was good. Next week, it will be more exciting as we talk about investments. The next 2 weeks will be on investing, so that'll be I think a little bit more entertaining and enjoyable. So, and we'll have some fun assignments definitely with that. So anyway, have a great week. Reach out if you have anything. Take care.